Tilottama's name was whispered long before mortals learned to shape stories, carried on breaths of wind that wandered between realms where even the gods hesitated to step. Her origin was not a single moment, but the slow blooming of an idea, that beauty, if shaped perfectly, could reshape destinies, unmake certainties, and reveal the truth hidden beneath desire. The ancient sages told that she was not born, but woven, crafted from the most radiant fragments of existence itself. From the glow of dawn resting on untouched lotus petals, the shimmering curve of river water beneath the moon, the soft heat rising from the bodies of lovers wrapped in their own longing. Every part of her form came from a place where emotion stirred the world into movement. She was beauty distilled into a living pulse. Before Tilottama came into being, the heavens were orderly in their brilliance. The gods moved with purpose. The demons rumbled with ambition. Mortals prayed upward with hope and fear intertwined. Yet something was missing, something that neither the divine nor the damned could name. Beauty existed everywhere, and yet nowhere. It shimmered only briefly, a flicker of admiration, a fleeting pleasure in the eyes, the soft catch of breath before it dissolved. No force held it steady long enough to mark the soul. The universe sensed this incompleteness, and like a deep ache, it begged for embodiment. Thus, the celestial artisans, those ancient forces whose hands shaped the stars and carved the flow of destiny, began their work. They searched through realms where light did not merely shine, but trembled, where emotion was not felt, but radiated. From the river of golden fire that ran beneath the cosmic veil, they gathered the shimmering essence of yearning. From the gardens that bloomed beyond time, they plucked petals that held the warmth of unspoken desire. From the songs sung by forgotten spirits, they pulled threads of longing that hummed with the anticipation of touch. They did not build Tilottama as one builds a statue or forms a mortal child. They summoned her from the very energy that makes hearts tremble. In the moment she took shape, the heavens shifted. A ripple spread through the fabric of existence, subtle yet irresistible, like the soft inhale before a lover leans closer. Light bent itself around her, not obeying rules, but responding to her presence as if drawn by instinct. Shadows softened, colors deepened, sound quieted. The universe paused as though it needed a breath to understand what it had just created. Tilottama opened her eyes, and in that gesture, simple, delicate, endlessly profound, the heavens felt something they had never truly experienced before. Awe that bordered dangerously on desire. Her beauty was not something that could be measured by features or form. It was movement, presence, sensation. When Tilottama turned her head, the air shifted as though touched by silk. When she walked, the ground seemed to remember her footfall, holding the impression of her passing for a heartbeat too long, as if reluctant to release her. Even the breeze behaved differently around her, curling with gentle boldness, like a timid admirer reaching out for one more stolen caress. And yet beauty alone did not define her. Within her chest lived a quiet awareness, the kind that flickered like a candle yearning to be seen. She did not yet understand desire, but she could feel its echo around her, rising like a tide. Those who first witnessed her creation did not speak. They simply looked. Gods who had shaped storms, forces who had swallowed worlds, beings who existed before emotion had a name. Their gazes trembled. Tilottama was not just exquisite, she was unsettling, captivating in a way that stripped the world bare. Her existence suggested temptation, vulnerability, and power in equal measure. She embodied the truth that beauty is not gentle. It devours attention, unravels strength, exposes longing that beings would rather keep hidden. They gave her a name only when the stir of their hearts became too vast to ignore. Tilottama, she who is composed of the finest qualities. Yet no title, no string of syllables could fully hold the essence they had breathed into her. She was desire incarnate, but she was also innocence, the innocence of something that does not yet understand the effect of its own radiance. When she looked upon the world for the first time, her expression held curiosity, not arrogance, wonder, not calculation. She was like a flame that had never known its capacity to burn. The divine realms reacted first, though quietly. The gods found their eyes drifting toward her, even when they wished to resist. Conversations faltered, thoughts wandered. Tilottama would pass through a hall, unaware of the silence pooling behind her, unaware of the shivering awe that followed. She did not seek attention, it clung to her. Even the goddesses felt it, not jealousy, but the strange stirring that comes from witnessing something impossibly rare. A softness rippled through their chests, a blend of admiration and an ache they could not name. Beauty in the heavens had always been recognized, respected, worshipped even, but never before had it commanded emotion so effortlessly.
Tilottama herself sensed all this dimly, like faint warmth on her skin. She felt the eyes on her, the unspoken breaths that shifted when she entered a space, the secret currents of yearning that brushed against her as she walked. They touched her like ghost hands, not oppressive, but undeniably present. And though she did not yet understand desire, she understood loneliness. The loneliness of being crafted as perfection when she had no memory, no history, no bonds. Beauty made her luminous, but it also set her apart. She felt like a song whose melody everyone recognized, but whose voice she herself had never heard. The celestial artisans watched her closely. They wondered whether they had created something too powerful, too enchanting, too fragile. A being woven from longing could not help but stir longing in return. They had crafted her for purpose, for peace, some whispered, for balance, others insisted. But purpose meant conflict, meant change, meant stirring the world into patterns neither gods nor demons could fully control. Tilottama's destiny was neither gentle nor small. Her existence alone would shift the desires of the powerful. In the mortal realm, legends began to rise long before she ever stepped upon the earth. Dreams of extraordinary beauty visited sleeping minds. Poets awoke with trembling hands, unable to describe the vision lingering in their chests. Lovers felt a sudden sweetness in the ache between their ribs. The world sensed her before it knew her, as though her creation had sent a tremor across every plane of existence. Tilottama did not yet know this, but her story had already begun weaving itself into the hearts of those who would hear it. And as the celestial winds curled around her, whispering possibilities, Tilottama lifted her gaze toward the endless sky. She felt a pull, gentle, magnetic, irresistible. Not of vanity, not of pride, but of fate. A destiny shaped by beauty so potent it could soothe or destroy, ignite love or fracture worlds. She did not yet understand herself, but she sensed one truth. Her existence would awaken desires that even the gods feared to name. And so her myth began, not with chaos or passion, but with a quiet breath, beauty becoming destiny, and destiny beginning to stir.
Tilottama's presence, though newly born into the cosmos, rippled outward like a warm tremor across divine and earthly realms, awakening the hearts of those destined to orbit her story. Before she understood the nature of her gaze or the weight of her steps, others felt her existence like a shift in the air, a slight quickening of breath before a storm of desire. The beings who would cross her path were not strangers to beauty, nor to danger, yet something in them stirred. A vulnerability they had spent ages concealing, suddenly laid bare in the quiet wake of her radiance. Among the gods, the first to feel this stirring was Indra, king of the heavens, wrapped in his armor of thunder and pride. To mortals he was a force untouchable, to demons a ruler to fear, to the celestial hosts a sovereign whose strength seemed unshakable. But beneath that powerful veneer lay a deep hunger he never named aloud, the longing to be truly seen, not as a king, not as a wielder of storms, but as a being capable of devotion. For centuries he buried this vulnerability beneath duty and glory. When word reached him of a celestial maiden whose beauty was said to rival the dawn itself, he laughed, dismissing it as the exaggeration of poets. Yet the moment he glimpsed Tilottama from across the shimmering halls of the heavens, his breath caught, not in lust, but in an ancient, aching wonder he had forgotten he possessed. He feared this feeling deeply. Desire, when directed at someone so luminous, threatened to reveal every crack in his carefully built armor. Closely intertwined with his fate were the Asura brothers Sunda and Upasunda, whose shadows stretched long across the mortal world. They were powerful, fierce, bound to each other by blood and ambition. Their bond was legend, two warriors who had conquered realms side by side, whose hearts beat in stubborn synchrony. But beneath their strength simmered a silent rivalry neither dared to speak of. Each craved dominance not only over kingdoms, but over fate itself. Each feared the day the other would surpass him, and though they laughed together, drank together, battled together,
An unspoken tension shimmered beneath every word exchanged. Their vulnerabilities, jealousy, pride, hunger for recognition lay dormant until Tilottama's existence brushed against their destinies like a spark on dry wood.
On the fringes of divine sight moved a mortal sage named Brigu, a seer of quiet disposition whose wisdom had carved pathways between the earthly and celestial. His gift was not foresight alone, but the ability to sense emotional currents long before they manifested. When he meditated near the lotus ponds of the earthly realm, he felt the tremor of Tilottama's creation like a heartbeat pulsing through the roots of the world. It awakened in him a tenderness he had buried long ago, a memory of love he had lost, a reminder of longing he had tried to transcend. Unlike the gods and demons who would later be enthralled by Tilottama's form, Brigu felt drawn to the loneliness he sensed within her, like a soft echo trapped inside a jewel. His fear was simple yet profound, the fear of witnessing beauty used as a weapon, of watching purity twisted into conflict. He had seen such stories unfold across ages, and he dreaded knowing that Tilottama, in all her innocence, might become another tale of suffering born from desire. Even the goddesses were not untouched. Apsaras, celestial dancers known for their grace and charm, felt a strange mixture of admiration and quiet insecurity as Tilottama walked among them. For ages, they had been the embodiment of divine allure, their movements the poetry of the heavens. Yet Tilottama's beauty was different, not practiced, not deliberate, but effortless and unsettling in its purity. Some felt drawn to protect her, sensing the vulnerability woven into her radiance. Others felt a soft ache in their chests, wondering what it meant for their own carefully cultivated charms. But none despised her. How could they? Tilottama's innocence disarmed even envy. Among them was Urvashi, an Apsara whose wisdom was masked beneath playful smiles. While others whispered about Tilottama's otherworldly glow, Urvashi studied her with discerning eyes. She noticed the way Tilottama paused before speaking, as though weighing every word, the way her fingers hovered slightly above surfaces, as if afraid her touch might change them, the way her gaze drifted toward the edges of halls, searching for something or someone she had not yet found. Urvashi sensed Tilottama's quiet yearning for belonging, the ache of a being crafted perfect, yet given no memories to anchor her. She herself feared becoming irrelevant beside such a creation, but she also felt a protective pull, like the instinct of an older sister. She hid this conflicting blend of insecurity and affection with the grace she had perfected over centuries.
But the one who observed Tilottama with the deepest clarity was none other than Brahma, the creator, whose hands had shaped the delicate threads of her existence. Though divine and seemingly detached, Brahma understood the fragile balance that beauty brought into the universe. He knew that Tilottama's form, infused with longing and desire, would become a mirror to the hearts of those who beheld her, reflecting their hidden fears and secret cravings. He worried not for her safety. After all, she was woven with the resilience of stars, but for her heart. A being crafted with such emotional resonance would feel deeply, even if she did not yet understand the sensations stirring within her. Brahma hid his concern behind celestial composure, but in truth he feared what her innocence might cost her. As for Tilottama herself, she remained unaware of the desires and vulnerabilities spiraling around her. She moved with the fluid grace of someone discovering the world for the first time, her curiosity soft and unassuming. When she passed Indra, she noticed the slight tremble in the air, but did not understand its cause. When she passed the Apsaras, she felt their admiration, but also their unease, sensing it like a faint vibration. When she dreamed, if dreams were what they were, she saw flashes of shadows and fire, of two figures bound together and destined to tear apart. She awoke from such visions with her heart fluttering, not with fear, but with a strange sadness she could not name. Her loneliness persisted quietly. Though she was surrounded by celestial beings, none reflected her in the way she yearned for. She wondered what it meant to be desired, what it meant to be feared, what it meant to be loved. These were not emotions she understood, but she felt them as shapes pressing gently against her soul, urging her toward a destiny she could not yet see. Her restrained power pulsed beneath her skin, not a destructive force, but the power of transformation, of shifting hearts and unraveling truths. She sensed that her existence carried weight, that her steps guided more than her own path, but she did not yet understand how deeply she would affect those who beheld her. Even the wind reacted to her presence differently. It curled around her ankles like a curious animal, brushed through her hair as though whispering secrets. The stars brightened subtly when she glanced upward, as if seeking her attention. The world recognized her even when she could not recognize herself. Each character surrounding her lived with their own fears, desires, and hidden fractures. Indra's longing to be seen, the Asura brothers' buried rivalry, Brigu's fear of beauty's corruption, the Apsara's insecurity and affection, Brahma's quiet worry. They became orbiting planets around the luminous center that was Tilottama, each drawn by a force beyond logic or choice. They did not yet know it, but their destinies were already intertwined. Tilottama's beauty would not merely enchant them, it would expose them, magnify their vulnerabilities, and draw them into a story woven from desire, conflict, and transformation. And as they moved unknowingly toward the moment their paths would collide, the cosmos held its breath, sensing the beginning of an unraveling that would alter the shape of myth itself.
Conflict did not erupt suddenly around Tilottama. It unfurled slowly, like a silk ribbon slipping from a held breath. Her presence, luminous and delicate, began as a tremor, something soft enough to ignore, subtle enough to dismiss. Yet beneath that softness grew an irresistible pull, a gravitational ache that drew hearts toward her with both longing and fear. The gods felt it first as an unusual warmth in their chests, a fleeting thought that lingered longer than it should. The demons felt it next as a curious stirring, not of lust alone, but of hunger for possession. Even the winds that curled around her feet seemed to struggle between caressing and clinging. Desire became an invisible thread connecting her to all who beheld her, tightening with each passing day. Indra was the first to recognize the danger. At night, while the heavens shimmered with star-lit serenity, he found himself thinking of Tilottama, her quiet steps, the reflective softness of her gaze, the way her presence lingered like a perfume crafted from dawn and longing. He resented this pull, knowing it revealed the very vulnerability he had fought to keep buried. When he looked at her, he felt the weight of his crown slip, reminding him he was not merely a king of storms, but a creature capable of yearning. The realization unsettled him. He feared what his desire could become if left unchecked. But even more, he feared what the desire of others might unleash. For the other gods had begun to look at Tilottama differently. Their gazes were not overtly possessive, yet beneath their admiration flickered something deeper, something dangerous. A quiet tension hummed among them, invisible yet palpable, as though the air had thickened with unspoken longing. In the celestial courts, where discussions once flowed effortlessly, now silence pooled whenever Tilottama entered. Words dried on tongues, thoughts spun toward her with a magnetic urgency none dared to speak aloud. She noticed the shift, not fully understanding it, but feeling it brush against her like an unseen hand. Among the goddesses, admiration mingled with worry. They sensed the crescendo of desire rising around Tilottama, and though none blamed her, they feared for her. Desire was not gentle. It could elevate, but it could just as easily devour. Urvashi watched her closely, trying to guide her without controlling her. Beauty, she once whispered to Tilottama, is a force. It can soothe or shatter. You must learn which it is you wish to do. Tilottama listened, but she did not yet know her answer.
Meanwhile, the demons felt her existence long before their eyes saw her. Sunda and Upasunda sensed her like heat beneath the soil, a promise of something intoxicating, alluring, irresistible. Their bond, once unbreakable, began to tremble under the weight of the yearning they could not yet name. When Tilottama finally stepped into their world during a celestial visit, the air between the brothers tightened. Their eyes followed her with a hunger barely masked, each heartbeat echoing with the fear that the other might claim what he desired. They exchanged glances sharp with tension, their unspoken rivalry swelling into something far more volatile. Tilottama sensed this shift too. She felt it as a strange heaviness in her chest whenever she encountered the brothers, a pull that frightened her not because it was dark, but because it was powerful. Their desire pressed against her like a tide. It was not gentle admiration, nor quiet longing. It was fierce, consuming, demanding. And though she felt no desire for them, she felt the tremor of their yearning as if it sought to coil around her. The sensation unsettled her,
stirring questions she did not know how to answer. Did she wish to be worshipped, desired, feared? Or did she simply wish to be seen, not as a creation of beauty, but as a being with her own longings? Her loneliness deepened in these moments. The emotions directed at her were immense, overwhelming, intoxicating, yet they did not belong to her. They were reflections of longing in others, not reflections of her own heart. She began to crave something different, connection not based on her beauty, but on her soul. But how could she find such a connection when beauty was all others could see? The question grew heavy inside her, pressing against the quiet innocence she carried. The winds whispered answers she could not decipher. Her dreams, once soft and unformed, now grew sharp with symbols, flames clashing against shadows, eyes burning with desire, bodies entwined in conflict. She saw Sunda and Upasunda circling each other like twin storms. She saw Indra clutching thunder with trembling hands. She saw herself at the center of a whirlpool made of longing and chaos. She awoke from these visions with her heart pounding, feeling as though the world itself had pressed its desire against her skin. It was Brahma who began to see the shape of the unraveling. He watched as Indra's glances grew heavier, as the celestial courts trembled with unspoken tensions, as the Asura brothers sharpened their ambitions. He saw the threads of fate weaving themselves into a pattern of conflict, forming a story that tilted dangerously toward catastrophe. He hesitated, torn between intervention and the inevitability of destiny. He had crafted Tilottama not as a weapon, but as a catalyst, a force meant to redirect the destructive path of Sunda and Upasunda. But he had underestimated the ripple of desire her existence would create. Beauty was never neutral. It echoed through the hearts of all who witnessed it, changing them in ways predictable and unpredictable.
Meanwhile, Tilottama's own desires began to shift, subtle yet potent. She longed for freedom, from expectation, from worship, from the hungry eyes that followed her. She longed for a purpose beyond being admired. The celestial artisans had given her form, but they had not given her direction. She felt suspended between realms, between identities, unsure whether she wished to embrace the power she held or escape from it altogether. Her innocence remained, but it was no longer untouched. It tinged with curiosity, frustration, and the faintest spark of anger. She began to understand that beauty, while powerful, could become a cage if she allowed others to define her through it. Her desire for self-definition clashed with the desires others projected onto her. And in this clash, conflict grew like a storm cloud on the horizon. Sunda and Upasunda's rivalry hardened into obsession. Nights found them each staring into the dark, imagining Tilottama's face, imagining the feel of her presence. They did not speak of it, yet their silence crackled with tension. Their loyalty to each other began to splinter, tiny fractures spreading through the bond that once seemed unbreakable. Indra watched from afar, sensing the danger. His desire for Tilottama became entangled with fear that the Asura brothers would claim her,
fear that he himself might lose control, fear that desire would lead to destruction. He began to contemplate drastic actions, strategies shaped not of wisdom, but of longing disguised as concern. He felt his heart splitting between what he wanted and what he knew he should do. Even the celestial realms reacted to the escalating tension. Stars flickered more erratically. Winds shifted in unfamiliar patterns. The lotus palms grew restless, their petals trembling as if anticipating a great upheaval. The fabric of the universe itself seemed to pulse with the strain of rising desire. And through it all, Tilottama felt the world tightening around her, pulling her into a story she was not prepared to inhabit. She sensed the yearning, the jealousy, the obsession that grew in the shadows. She sensed the conflict her beauty ignited. And for the first time she wondered whether her existence was a blessing or a curse woven into the shape of perfection. Desire had awakened, and the world trembled in its grip, awaiting the moment when longing would ignite into irreversible chaos. Tilottama felt the moment approaching long before she understood it. The air grew thicker around her, charged with emotion so intense it seemed to vibrate against her skin. Lights shimmered differently in her presence, even shadows trembled at the edges. Her heartbeat moved in uneven rhythms, as though trying to warn her of an oncoming storm she had no power to stop. Desire had stalked her quietly until now, soft at first, merely a ripple. But ripples become waves, and waves become tides, and the tide had finally risen high enough to drag her into its depths. The energy around her shifted into something alive, pulsing, breathless. Every path, every longing, every fear that had woven itself around her was now converging into a single devastating moment. It began when the celestial court opened for the midsummer convergence, a rare gathering where both gods and demons walked the same shimmering pathways under guarantees of truce. The halls glowed with the warmth of suspended stars, their radiance reflecting off the polished floors like liquid light. Fragrant winds drifted through the chamber, carrying hints of sandalwood and lotus. Tilottama entered the hall with her usual quiet grace, unaware that her mere presence would ignite a fire no one could contain. Conversations faltered the moment she stepped inside, gazes turned, breaths caught. But two pairs of eyes burned hotter than the rest. Sunda and Upasunda stood at opposite ends of the chamber, though they had arrived together. Their bond, once a fortress, now shook with violent cracks. Both felt the same surge of emotion when they saw her, a longing that pounded through their veins with enough force to blur reason. Tilottama felt that longing slam into her like heat. It was intoxicating and terrifying, a hunger that wrapped around her like smoke. The brothers' gazes collided across the room. Something primal snapped inside both of them. Their silent rivalry exploded into open fire. But Indra, standing near the high balcony, felt it too. His pulse quickened painfully.
He had tried to restrain his yearning, to cloak it beneath responsibility, but seeing her now, bathed in starlight, unaware of the chaos her presence invoked, shattered the fragile control he had fought to maintain. His fingers clenched around the railing until lightning crackled faintly at his touch. He knew something terrible was about to happen. He could feel it in the trembling fabric of the heavens.
Tilottama sensed all of this rise around her, swirling like a storm. She felt the heat of Indra's gaze, the hunger of Sunda and Upasunda, the collective desire filling the air so thickly she could almost taste it. It tasted like fire and longing and fear. And beneath it all, her own emotions trembled violently. Loneliness, curiosity, the aching need to understand herself, the longing to escape and the desire to confront everything at once. Her breath came shallow, her pulse fluttering wildly beneath her skin. She felt drawn toward all three men, and yet desperately needed distance from them. Her soul seemed to stretch in opposite directions. The moment broke open when Sunda stepped forward, unable to restrain himself. His voice carried a raw edge, trembling with passion. "Tilottama," he said, the name heavy on his tongue. "Come to me." It was not a request. It was a plea wrapped in command, in desperation, in burning hunger. His eyes glowed like molten gold. Upasunda's reaction was instantaneous. His hand gripped his brother's arm with a force that sent sharp sparks into the air. "No," he growled with fury and desire. "She is not yours to summon." The hall fell utterly silent. Even the stars outside seemed to dim. Tilottama froze. Her body tensed, her breath caught. Something within her, something deep, powerful, and long restrained, stirred awake. She felt their desire crash against her like waves against stone. She felt their need, their desperation, their unraveling control. And for the first time she felt something rise inside her in response, not desire for them, but the overwhelming urge to break free from this cage woven from longing. Indra moved before he realized it, stepping into the center of the hall. His voice cut through the tension, sharp and trembling. Enough. Electricity laced through the word. His chest heaved with the effort of speaking against his own desire. He wanted her too. He could not deny it. But he also feared what might unfold if he allowed the Asura brothers to act unchecked. He said, "Your desire does not give you the right to claim her," though the words tasted like ash. "She is not an object of conquest." Sunda's eyes narrowed. "And you?" he spat. "Are you exempt from desire? I see the longing twisting inside you." His gaze flicked to Tilottama, then back to Indra. "We all feel it. She pulls at us like destiny." Upasunda stepped closer, every muscle in his body taut. "She awakens hunger in gods and demons alike. Why should we pretend otherwise?" Tilottama felt the weight of their words like hands pressing against her throat. Desire, hunger, claiming, destiny. Each word chipped at the thin walls she had tried to build around her heart. Her vision blurred with overwhelming emotion.
She wanted to scream that she was more than their longing, more than their fantasies, more than the embodiment of beauty they projected onto her. But her voice refused to rise.
Instead, something else rose. A strange heat unfurled in her chest, spreading through her body like the slow bloom of fire. Her skin tingled, her breath deepened, the air around her shivered as though charged with divine energy. She took a step forward, and the entire hall seemed to lean toward her. The brothers felt it first, a pull both sensual and terrifying. Their bodies responded instinctively, hearts pounding, breaths hitching. Indra felt it too, though his response was layered with fear. Tilottama was radiating something powerful, emotional energy, sensual energy, something that transcended beauty and plunged into the realm of the divine. She lifted her gaze, and her eyes glowed, not with anger, but with the fullness of emotion she had tried so long to understand. For the first time, she let the world see the turmoil within her. "I am not yours," she whispered. The softness of her voice struck harder than thunder. Sunda's chest tightened painfully. Upasunda felt something twist inside him like a blade. Indra's breath left him in a single trembling rush. Tilottama's next breath trembled with resistance and power. "I am not an object to be possessed. I am not the mirror of your desires. I am—" Her voice broke. Her body trembled. A tear slipped down her cheek, glowing faintly like liquid starlight. That tear changed everything. Sunda reached toward her, not with force, but with something raw. Need, tenderness, desperation. "Tilottama." Upasunda moved at the same moment, his hand also reaching out, his heart cracking under the weight of wanting something he could never rightfully claim. Their hands collided midair, and the shock of contact sent fire through both their bodies. Indra shouted, lightning exploding around his form. Then the brothers turned on each other. Desire, jealousy, and rage erupted in an instant. Words became shouts, shouts became blows. Their emotions, long suppressed and tightly wound, burst free like storms colliding. The celestial hall shook beneath their fury. Winds roared, stars flickered violently. And Tilottama watched, her heart tearing, as the desire she never asked for finally broke open into chaos. Her beauty had awakened longing. Her innocence had awakened obsession. And now, desire had awakened devastation, consuming everything in its path. In the quiet that followed the rupture of passions, Tilottama felt the world rearrange itself around the echo of what had transpired. The air still vibrated with remnants of longing, though the storm had exhausted itself into a hush that smelled of endings and new beginnings. She stood at the center of that hush, her breath slow, her gaze lowered, as if watching the last threads of the climax dissolve into the space between heartbeats.
Around her, the divine and the mortal struggled to recalibrate their senses, for what she had awakened in them would not easily return to silence. Their desires had flared too brightly, too honestly, illuminating vulnerabilities that could never again remain hidden beneath the armor of pride and power. Something irreversible had fractured, leaving behind not ruin, but the bare truth of each soul involved. Indra was the first to step back from the brink, the golden shimmer of his aura flickering with the weight of realization. The intensity he had allowed to consume him now softened into something almost tender, something he had not shown the world in centuries. The god of storms, accustomed to conquest, accustomed to victory, felt the strange unfamiliarity of humility press against his chest. He had reached for Tilottama with a fire that knew no restraint, and now, in the aftermath, he recognized how deeply that fire had threatened to undo him. His desire had unveiled a longing he had never admitted existed, the longing to be seen without his crown, without his thunderous reputation. Tilottama had reflected back to him the part of himself he feared most, the yearning for closeness, for connection, for a moment unbound by divine duty. That truth settled upon him like a quiet rain, cleansing yet undeniably sobering. Kubera, too, felt the consequences of the climax resound through the chambers of his being. The wealth he possessed, the treasures he guarded, suddenly seemed hollow compared to the fleeting spark of intimacy he had nearly tasted. His envy had burned hot, but in that burning he had glimpsed a reality that stripped away his pretense of contentment. The desire Tilottama awakened had not been merely lustful. It had peeled back the ornate layers he wore as protection. Beneath them lay a lonely heart, one that had hoarded gems and gold to fill an emptiness that beauty alone could not heal. The confrontation with that emptiness shook him, leaving him quieter, gentler in the aftermath. The transformation was subtle but profound, a small surrender to vulnerability, a step toward acknowledging the emotions he had long tried to silence.
The demons, who had watched the unraveling from the shadows, found themselves similarly changed. Their chaotic nature had fed eagerly on the tension, their eyes bright with hunger as the climax spiraled near collapse. Yet as the dust settled, even they felt the ripple of something unfamiliar. Tilottama's presence, her fierce yet fragile radiance, had stirred in them a sense of awe they had not anticipated. She had shown them that desire could be more than a weapon, more than a spark for violence. It could be a mirror reflecting their own fractured hopes, hopes they had buried under centuries of rage. They recoiled not from shame, but from the uncomfortable truth that beauty could reach even into their darkness and leave a mark. That realization unsettled them deeply, leaving them hesitant, contemplative, and strangely unwilling to meet her gaze. But the greatest transformation unfolded within Tilottama herself. She felt the tremors of the climax echoing through her, not as wounds, but as revelations. For so long, she had existed as an embodiment of celestial artistry, admired yet misunderstood, desired yet untouched in her heart's quiet chambers. She had walked between realms with the grace of a dream, carrying the weight of beauty without knowing its purpose beyond inspiring awe. Now, In the aftermath, she understood something essential. Her beauty was not a passive blessing nor a curse. It was a force, a living current that shaped destinies. And for the first time, she sensed that she had the right to decide how that force should flow. The desire she had awakened in others had also awakened within her a desire, not for adoration, but for agency, for the ability to choose what her existence would mean. She felt a tenderness rising in her chest, one that did not belong to any of the gods or demons who had sought her. It belonged to herself, a blooming awareness that she could wish for connection without losing her autonomy, that she could yearn without being consumed. She recognized her loneliness not as weakness, but as a space ready to be filled with something authentic. This newfound clarity softened her expression, lending her an inner glow that transcended even the divine artistry that shaped her form. With a slow breath, Tilottama lifted her gaze. The world around her seemed to tremble under the quiet strength she now radiated. Indra, Kubera, and the watching demons felt it immediately, a shift from the intoxicating allure that had drawn them toward her to a deeper, calmer resonance that held them at a respectful distance. The climax had changed the nature of their connection. Where once they had reached for her with unrestrained hunger, now they approached her with reverence, with a cautious awareness of the fragile truths she had revealed in each of them. And she, in turn, acknowledged them with a softness that neither invited nor rejected, but simply recognized their humanity beneath their grandeur.
A gentle wind swept across the realm, carrying with it the remnants of the night's intensity. Tilottama closed her eyes for a moment, letting the breeze brush against her skin like a promise of renewal. The world felt different now, less like a stage upon which she had been placed, and more like a space she could inhabit on her own terms. She sensed the lingering gaze of every being present, but instead of feeling weighed down by it, she felt strangely uplifted. Their desires no longer clung to her like chains. Instead, they drifted around her like petals carried by the wind, acknowledgments of her presence, not claims upon her essence. Indra approached her quietly, his voice stripped of thunder. He did not confess, did not plead, did not reach for her. Instead, he offered a bow, a gesture not of surrender, but of respect. He understood now that the force he had felt was not hers alone. It was his own longing reflected back at him through the clarity of her existence. Kubera followed, carrying in his eyes the faint shimmer of humility. The demons kept their distance, unsettled but changed, their usual sharpness softened by contemplation. None dared to break the new equilibrium, for they sensed that Tilottama was no longer merely a celestial creation. She was becoming something far more powerful, someone who understood her own depth. As dawn approached, the realm brightened with a gentle glow. Tilottama felt the warmth touch her fingertips, spreading through her like an awakening. The climax had not shattered her, it had illuminated her. She walked forward, each step deliberate, her silhouette shimmering with a beauty no longer defined by others' desires, but grounded firmly in her own awakening. The world watched, captivated not by her allure, but by the transformation unfolding within her.
And though the night's passions had dwindled into quiet memory, their consequences lingered, woven into the hearts of gods, demons, and Tilottama herself. The outcome was not destruction, nor perfect harmony, but change, and in change there was truth. Tilottama no longer walked as a figure sculpted from perfection. She walked as a being who had discovered the power of her own heart, and that discovery left a mark upon every soul who had witnessed her. The myth would remember this night not for the chaos it threatened to unleash, but for the transformations it ignited, transformations that echoed long after the final tremor faded into the dawn.
In the quiet that settles after the unraveling of desire, after the trembling of gods and demons and the awakening within a being sculpted from celestial artistry, there lingers a breath that does not belong to any one voice. It is the breath of the myth itself, exhaled slowly across the threshold of memory, as if refusing to disappear into the stillness that follows. Tilottama's story does not end with the transformations she ignited, nor with the lives she touched, nor even with the clarity she found within herself. Instead, it unfurls into the spaces between thoughts, into the shadows of longings unspoken, into the delicate hum of beauty that cannot be possessed. Her myth continues not as a conclusion, but as an echo that stretches beyond the boundaries of the tale, whispering to anyone willing to listen that beauty is not a destination, but a force, shapeless and yet ever present, impossible to define and yet impossible to ignore. In the wake of her journey, the world feels subtly altered. The rivers run the same course, but their surface catches the light differently, as if reflecting a truth they had never dared to reveal. The winds carry the same familiar sense, yet beneath them lies a faint sweetness reminiscent of the aura she once left behind. The celestial canopy above appears unchanged, scattering its stars in the same patient patterns, but those who look carefully sense that something has shifted in the way the constellations breathe. Tilottama's presence, ephemeral and permanent all at once, resides in these small tremors. She has woven herself into the language of the world, not through dominance or conquest, but through the gentle insistence of her existence, a beauty that does not need to demand attention, because it is impossible to unsee once glimpsed. What does her myth teach? Not in the rigid sense of a lesson, nor in the narrowing frame of a moral, but in that broader, more fluid way that only ancient stories can. Her tale reveals that beauty is never truly passive. It stirs, it beckons, it challenges, it awakens. It brings forth longing not to torment those who feel it, but to illuminate what lies hidden beneath the surfaces they show to the world. For the gods, her presence untangled the desires they had wrapped tightly beneath centuries of power. For the demons, she unveiled cravings they never allowed themselves to name. For the mortals who heard her story whispered across the realms, she became a reminder that yearning is not shameful. It is the language of the soul reaching towards something beyond its grasp. And for herself, beauty became not a destiny imposed upon her, but a mirror
reflecting the depth she had always possessed.
Tilottama teaches that desire is not a singular flame, but a constellation of forces moving in quiet equilibrium: passion, longing, fear, vulnerability, hope, and the yearning for closeness. In her myth, desire becomes a river that carries both ruin and revelation, a river that cannot be stopped by divine command nor shaped entirely by will. It flows where it wishes, carving new paths through even the hardest stone. And though its current may unsettle, it also cleanses. It reveals truths that remain unreachable in the stasis of calm. Desire, in its rawest form, exposes the architecture of the heart. It strips away the masks worn for centuries. It leaves behind a clarity that comforts as much as it unsettles. Tilottama's myth shows that desire is not the enemy of reason, nor the downfall of the divine. It is the pulse that reminds every being, mortal or immortal, that they are alive. And yet, the myth also reveals that chaos accompanies beauty not as a punishment or a warning, but as a shadow that forms naturally beneath any source of light. Beauty rearranges the world around it. It disrupts, stirs, awakens uncertainty. It challenges the structures that claim permanence. Tilottama's arrival did not unravel the world. It revealed the volatility that already existed beneath the surface. The god's longing, the demon's hunger, the mortal's fascination, these were not created by her, but exposed by her presence. She did not force chaos. She simply made it impossible to ignore. And in doing so, she offered each being a chance to confront the truth they had hidden from themselves. Chaos, in her myth, is not destruction. It is transformation, the cracking of old boundaries to make space for what lies beneath. The longing she evokes is equally layered. For beauty inspires desire, yes, but her essence awakens something deeper: the longing to be understood, the longing to be seen clearly, the longing to find meaning within one's own existence. Tilottama's myth whispers that longing is not a weakness, but a compass, pointing toward the spaces within us that remain unexplored. Her own longing, quiet at first, then burning softly and steadily, became the thread that tied her journey together. Through her encounters, through the desires projected onto her, she came to understand that her heart too possessed its own direction. She learned that longing can be tender, curious, hesitant, bold, or fierce, but it is always transformative, for it is only by acknowledging one's longings that one truly discovers oneself. As her reflection settles into the vast stillness of myth, Tilottama becomes not a figure of unattainable perfection, but a symbol of evolving identity. She reminds the world that even beings born from divine artistry carry within them complexities, wounds, hopes, fears, and desires. Her story refuses to reduce her to an object of admiration. Instead, it presents her as a shifting constellation of emotions, a vulnerable yet powerful force navigating a world that both worships and misunderstands her. Her myth lingers because it invites the audience to consider their own depths, to acknowledge the hidden desires that stir beneath the surface,
the vulnerabilities they conceal even from themselves, and the beauty they often underestimate within their own hearts.
In the end, Tilottama's presence becomes a quiet hymn woven into the breath of creation. She embodies the spiritual truth that beauty is not defined by perfection, but by presence. It is not a fixed quality, but a living energy that shifts with the soul's movements. Her story teaches that beauty grows when it is acknowledged, deepens when it is understood, and transforms when it is claimed, not by others, but by oneself. She is a reminder that the light within a being is not limited by the expectations cast upon them, that even the most radiant creation carries within her the right to evolve, to choose, to feel, to awaken. And so, her myth continues long after the final scene has faded. It whispers through twilight skies, drifts along moonlit waters, settles gently into the hearts of those who dare to feel deeply. It urges the listener to lean closer, to breathe a little slower, to sense the quiet pulse beneath the world's surface. It reminds them that desire is not a fire to fear, but a path to follow, carefully, courageously, with the willingness to be transformed. It assures them that longing is the echo of the soul calling itself home, and it invites them to see beauty not as something distant or unreachable, but as something that lives, trembles, and glows within their own depths. Tilottama's myth does not end with resolution. It ends with resonance, a lingering warmth, a soft shimmer, a breath that remains suspended between worlds. Its story lives on as an atmosphere, a sensation, a fragile yet eternal ripple in the fabric of creation. It asks for no conclusion, offers no certainty. Instead, it leaves the listener with a feeling that beauty, desire, chaos, and longing are not forces to be feared or tamed, but currents to be understood, embraced, and carried within. It leaves behind the quiet truth that the heart, like the cosmos, is vast, mysterious, and eternally unfolding. And in that unfolding, the myth of Tilottama continues to breathe.